So in the tradition of Cornell, today you're not going to hear about the mechanics arts. We're going to have a speaker and a special guest. Still on the theme of earth energy, and in particular the theme of unconventional gas development in shale. We have someone, Lance Simmons, who after his master's degree in public policy from Temple went to work in the public sector. And I'm going to read to you some of his experiences over the last 35 years. He began as a Congressional Liaison Officer for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, then became Senior Economic Counsel to Senator James Sasser in the U.S. Senate Budget Committee. Moved on from there to become the Assistant Executive Director of the U.S. Conference on Mayors. I'm going to skip a couple things here. Senior Advisor to the President's Commission on Year 2000 Conversions. Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the U.S. Small Business Administration. Somewhere in there he got a stint with NOAA, which you didn't bother including here. Anyway, fast forward to the present, or the immediate past, from 2004 until this last year, he was Special Assistant for Intergovernmental Affairs to former Governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, and in that capacity had an opportunity to observe the interactions among Harrisburg and how many individual legislative communities are there?
2,500 municipalities
in Pennsylvania on issues related to unconventional gas development. So we promised early in this semester, especially for the students, that you were going to see the whole picture from how a methane molecule came into existence to the big picture of socio-economic and political affairs that have been generated by those molecules. So I asked Lance to come and talk to you about his experiences, and just by coincidence, somebody was passing through Ithaca, New York today, so some of you recognize Josh Fox. What was it that you've done recently? Okay, so Gasland, I suspect most of you have seen it, or everybody has heard about it, and so Josh is Mr. Gasland and adds not the political aspect to today's discussion, but the art aspect. And again, in the strong tradition of Cornell University, as we know, there are many pathways to knowledge and wisdom, and interpretation through art is one of them. So this is going to be a quite different experience for you today from the other seminars that you've attended in terms of content, but also in terms of style, because neither of these gentlemen are going to get up and lecture at you with PowerPoint slides. Is that okay? You have one? Okay. So there will be some comments from Lance, and there will probably be some reactions from Josh, but the purpose of today is engagement. Right? These are not scientists and engineers. You're not going to see equations. They want to engage with you and feel the human element. And so we hope that you will engage with them on that direction. So without further delay, Lance.
Thank you, John. Well, you know, you really shouldn't clap until after you've heard what I have to say. It's really a pleasure to be here. I thank Josh for coming up and his sleep-deprived existence these days. I really appreciate him making the extra effort to come up and join me with you today. When Tony asked me to do this, first of all, let me just say parenthetically, about a year ago, Tony and I were speaking in a conference in Pittsburgh, and we had dinner the night before. And during the course of that dinner, I was on my high horse and talking about this issue in rather candid, frank terms. And at the end of the dinner, Tony looked across the table and said, you know, I'm going to have to go back and completely rewrite my presentation tomorrow. I said, well, I'm sorry that you're going to lose sleep, but I'm really looking forward to the rewritten version. And the next day, he did a presentation in this auditorium at Carnegie Mellon, or University of Pittsburgh, I can't remember which. And he did one of the most profound things. As a person who likes to speak, and a person who speaks a lot and has heard a lot of speeches, he did a very profound thing. He came up with a letter that he wished the industry would have written to the communities before they engaged in this activity. And he finished with a letter from the communities back. And the letter and I'll just sum up what, because he laid out a lot of protocols and a lot of activities that maybe the industry should consider before they go into a community. But in the letter from the community back, it was basically thank you for your time and your effort. But we've come to the conclusion that doing the right thing is wrong. Now think about that for a second. I mean, that's a rather profound statement. Because as you will hear in the political machinations of this issue, you will hear, well, if we just do it the right way, this will be a fantastic opportunity. Natural gas. This is our salvation, at least for the next 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And we just need to do it right. And to which I take some degree of birthing, I guess I'm a birther here, I take some degree of birthing the presentation that Tony made that next day. I think it is right on. It's spot on. And I think what you've seen in the paper that he and Bob Howard have put together and had published in this last week or so, it takes into question really the larger question is, can you do it right? And that's an issue which very rarely gets raised, even amongst the environmental community. And I'm fond of saying, and Tony has probably heard me say this 40 times in the last 18 hours, if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers. And nothing could be more appropriate, nothing could be more succinct, nothing could be more spot on than in the area of politics or public policy in making sure that you ask the right questions. The question is not, should we wean ourselves off of foreign oil? The question is, should we wean ourselves off of fossil fuels? And if you don't ask the right question, you're probably going to get an unsatisfactory answer. And I do not believe that we're asking the right questions. And the right question is, how do we wean ourselves off fossil fuels? How do we shift the economic paradigm from one that is devoted and heavily dependent and reliant upon fossil fuels to one that is dependent and reliant on alternative energy and renewable energy sources? And as Tom Friedman so eloquently says in his book, Hot Latin Sabbath, I hope all of you have read it, we need to get to the point where we are talking about fuels from heaven rather than fuels from hell. Fuels from hell come from underneath. They're exhaustible. They're finite. And a byproduct is emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. Fuels from heaven, wind, solar. They're inexhaustible. They're infinite. And there are no carbon emissions problems. So this is where we as a society, this is where we as a government, this is where we as a world need to be headed. Now, the question is, how do we get there? I'm speaking to you today from probably the unflattering proposition or perspective of politics. Now, those of you, has anyone ever studied Latin? Those of you know politics derives from two Latin terms. Poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking insects. And to this proud, noble avocation, I have actually devoted the last 35 years of my professional career. I am an irresolute idealist. I've been called that before. I was even featured at at a seminar at the Kennedy School as an irresolute idealist. And I still believe that government can work. And I believe that government has to work. I made a decision 35 years ago that I was going to do my best to try to get inside to make changes, realizing that I was not single-handedly going to change the world. But hopefully I was going to change bits and pieces of it, which made it a better place. And none of that comes home more true than when you're a parent. I've got 2 teenage boys. I'm a single father. I've raised them. And every day, you look into their eyes. And every day, when you talk to them. And every day, when you hear what a pawn of the system you are, you just well up with more pride. And this is all about them. This is all about them. If we lose sight of that, we lose sight of asking the right questions. I started my political career working for President Jimmy Carter. There are many of you in this room, I'm sure, who weren't even born when Jimmy Carter was elected president. I was with Jimmy Carter in the New Hampshire primary in 1976. Jimmy Carter gave a speech 34 years ago yesterday, 34 years ago, in which he declared the energy crisis the moral equivalent of war. Jimmy Carter was a nuclear engineer by training. And I just want to read to you 2 excerpts from that speech. This was a national speech on national TV. And envision, picture any politician, any statesman starting off a speech today like this. Tonight I want to have an unpleasant talk with you about a problem unprecedented in our history. With the exception of preventing war, this is the greatest challenge our country will face during our lifetimes. The energy crisis has not yet overwhelmed us, but it will if we do not act quickly. And then he continues, our decision about energy will test the character of the American people and the ability of the President and the Congress to govern. This difficult effort will be the moral equivalent of war, except that we will be uniting our efforts to build and not destroy. Does that ring true today? You betcha. To borrow from another contemporary politician, who probably does not feel the same way. You betcha. But the question we have to ask ourselves is what has happened in the 3.5 decades since? I know one thing that happened. Ronald Reagan is not a political statement. It's just a statement of fact. Ronald Reagan took the solar panels off the White House roof. And what we have done is we've been stuck in neutral while the world has passed us by. And some would maintain, and I would be one of them, that we're actually falling backwards. And we're actually going in reverse. Ask the right questions. And you know, what I'd like to do today, as much as anything, talk about my favorite subject, which is me, but as much as that, I want to issue a challenge. I want to issue a challenge to the environmental community that in the face of this enormous onslaught of money and influence and power, there has to be a coordinated message. There has to be a message from the other side. Because you'll never match them in financial resources. in all likelihood, you will be unable to match them in political power. So you have to rely on message. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I see a conflicted message. I see a fractured message coming from the environmental community today. I have witnessed it firsthand, and I've had people look at me in the eye and tell me to my face that the only thing we need to do is tough love, tough regulations. And I've had other people look at me in the face and tell me, we've got to stop. And we've got to take stock. And you know, to my conservative friends, I say any prudent business decision is going to be based on a market survey, because you're not going to invest a lot of money unless you have some degree of comfort or confidence that your product will sell. Why in the world does it make sense, in the face of so many unanswered questions, to jump into a pool where you don't know whether the water is 6 inches or 6 feet? And it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility, not just to yourself or your fellow man, but more importantly to future generations, to start asking those questions and start getting those answers. And in the process, why would you want to go pell-mell, full speed ahead into an exercise where you don't know the answers? You know, in politics, in my profession, there's an old saying, there's an axiom: never ask the question you don't know the answer to. Well, we gotta start thinking like this, folks. You know, my generation, I was weaned on the anti-war. If I was there at the first Earth Day, I read The Population Bomb. I worked for Jimmy Carter. I heard these wonderful platitudes. I saw the development of Synthetic Fuels Corporation in the 70s. I remember in every federal office building in the country, there was a plate on every light switch that said, "Please turn the lights out." And we did. We were the we generation. We were going to save the world. Let me tell you something. The W got inverted. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know when it happened. But it happened. We turned into the me generation. And you ought to be really, really angry. You ought to be really angry at us, because we have let you down. And you got to pick up the pieces. It's all up to you. Some of us will continue to fight valiantly. Some will say, "Oh my goodness, you're just a pawn in the system. What can you really do? What changes can you really make?" Well, I'll tell you one thing. What I tell my kids every single day is, you never stop trying. Never stop trying. Desperate times call for desperate measures, folks. We are in the midst, in the depths of a horrible economic recession, one that is far deeper than anyone wants anyone to know. And it's all you need to do is just talk to people. And they're scared, and they're angry. And in desperate times, people do desperate things. And people use desperate tactics to achieve those things. And playing to fear is one of them. And man, have our politicians gotten good at playing to fear. And we've got to figure out a way around it. Our political system is corrupted. It's corrupted by big money. I've seen it. I've seen a sea change in just the 35 years that I've been involved in this, and it is systemically dysfunctional. And we need to figure out why and fix it. Now, I have ideas about why and how to fix it. I'm not going to bore you with them. You can figure it out on your own. But it needs to be addressed. I think one of the most important things is we have to start rewarding vision. And we have to reward wisdom. And we have to reward intellectualism. And we have to reward science. And there are no rewards for any of those things today. We are a desperate, angry, fearful, and intellectually lazy society. And we need to change that. More than ever before, you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. And our political system is paid for. Lock, stock, and barrel. If you gave me one wish, one thing, I can only do one thing to change it, I'd say let's figure out a way to remove special interest money from the political system. What is it that distinguishes us as a democracy from any banana republic? What is it? Right now, it's hard to find the distinction. Last year, Big Five oil companies made $77.4 billion in profit. And that includes a nearly $4 billion loss by BP. All right? Which a year ago tomorrow brought to our civilization another real eye-opener. And over the last decade, these Big Five oil companies made $900 billion in profits. And still they're rewarded with tax incentives that date back to the beginning of the last century. Oil depletion allowance, intangible drilling costs. That tax subsidy was put into the budget in 1916. Have these companies matured a little bit since then? Do they need these kind of incentives? I don't think so. And despite what you see on television ad nauseum about how these companies are investing in your future and in a green future, there are companies in high-tech sectors like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors which regularly invest 15 to 18% of their revenue in research and development. U.S. energy companies invest less than 0.25%. They need our incentives. They need our tax dollars. You want to know why this is such a pampered industry? Just follow the money. Just follow the money. Tom Cruise, show me the money. Now, I got involved in this issue in sort of a roundabout way. Being in charge of trying to reach out and be liaison to the governor for all of these various local governments throughout Pennsylvania, and having been trained by Al Gore to be a climate change messenger to deliver the gospel of an inconvenient truth around the world, which I've done on 95 different occasions, which I'm doing at 4:30 this afternoon here. And having been put in charge of both the Wind Energy Development Task Force and the Solar Energy Development Task Force under the governor, I was invited up to what is our northern tier in Pennsylvania, which would be right below your southern tier of New York. Very rural communities, type of communities that God calls home. And I was invited up there by local elected officials, county officials, who wanted to show me what was going on with this exercise, this drilling exercise. And of course, they came at it from the perspective, oh, the roads are a mess. There's traffic, and we're not used to traffic, and they're beating up the roads. And I went up to this county, Tioga County. You have one, we have one too. And in Tioga County, the Republican county commissioner there, by the name of Eric Coolidge, who is a direct descendant of none other than Calvin Coolidge, and who lives in Coolidge Hollow. Honest to God truth. In God's country, he's a dairy farmer. Very soft-spoken, very rational, very moderate, a very conservative Republican. I spent a day with him touring Tioga County, and a county commissioner from Bradford County, which is right next door, which is getting the lion's share of drilling, and in Sullivan County on the other side. And Eric brought to my attention something that had received no attention whatsoever in our discussions of this issue before that. He said, look at the social fabric issues that this is visiting upon my community. He said, we're responsible for social service agencies, being a county official, and I can tell you that we're seeing increases in domestic violence, increases in violence in general, increases in things like teenage pregnancy. I said, teenage pregnancy? I said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, no. He said, my social service agencies are telling me that, we're experiencing problems that we've never experienced before. And I went back and I addressed the senior staff about my wonderful adventures to the North Country, and they all guffawed. Huh, you've got to be out of your mind. And a week later, I got in my office, and there was a report. It was a 10-year study on increases in sexual assault in boomtown communities across the United States, in Wyoming, and Colorado, and Texas. Threefold increase. I immediately proceeded to distribute a summary of this on every member of the senior staff chair. So that got me into the issue. It gave me a legitimate way to get into the issue. And let me tell you something. Do not do what we have done and are doing in Pennsylvania. Don't. We have twin deficits. We have a deficit of regulations, and we have a deficit of regulators. And one of the things that I find probably more disturbing than anything else in this whole issue is the fact that we have good intentioned legislators, good intentioned public servants who are being given a veil to hide behind by environmentalists. That's a strong statement. And that's going to get me in trouble with folks, I'm sure. But I see it. And I see people using that veil and hiding behind it. Now, I don't know what the answers are. I'm not a scientist. I'll leave that to the brilliant people in this room, like Bob and Tony and Jeff. I don't know what the answers are, but I know one thing. We better find out. Because the single most potent argument that is used by well-intentioned people, well, first of all, anything but coal, and second of all, this is a much cleaner alternative. Natural gas is a much cleaner alternative than coal. If that's not true, we need to know. And we need to cut the charade and get these well-intentioned folks back on track. I don't know the answer. I've got some suspicions. And I think what Tony and Bob's work have done is help open the door to asking the more serious questions. And why wouldn't you want to know the answers? Why wouldn't you? Of course you would. You need to. How can you make decisions? Good decisions. We have got to change the way that we do business. And I use that term advisedly. But the way we do the people's business. That's all I'm going to lecture at you today. I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and I'm sure he's going to have far more interesting things to say than I. But I just want, and I would love to engage in conversation with you, because I want this to be a back and forth. I don't want this to be a, me talking to you sort of thing. But I got to tell you, folks, it is the preeminent issue of our time. It was the preeminent issue of our time 34, 35 years ago. It is even more so today. And we've got to figure out a way to deal with it. I don't know the answer. But I know one thing. Before I find out the answers, I want to slow down. Josh?
Thank you.
But, Lance Simmons is the one person in the Rendell administration that we're talking to. So, thanks. I don't know where you come in on this conversation. If you understand that we're in the possibility of drilling the entire southern tier of New York State, that we're in the largest natural gas drilling campaign in history, and that the natural gas industry has portrayed itself as this cleaner burning alternative to coal. And what Tony and Bob have done shown what everybody who's in gas drilling territory, I think, knows intrinsically and inherently just from living in these places, that there's so many fugitive emissions that are coming off of the well sites. They're pipelines, they're flared off, they're vented off, the compressor stations, all these pieces of the gas machinery that you're venting off methane straight to the atmosphere. It's very much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2 is. I never fail to mention this report or Alan Armendariz' air quality report from Fort Worth that shows that there's a huge emissions profile for the natural gas drilling industry in Fort Worth. It's simply like a staple cornerstone of what I talk about, because there is this so I don't know where you come down on this. I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years. I got this gas lease in Mel, went out and made a movie, traveled around America, and traveled around America again, did about 12 times, went to 120 cities in the United States or towns and showed the film, got more and more evidence from people. I kind of do it every day, and it's still interesting. Primarily because there's so many ways into the questions, and boy, I don't know where to start. I blame Michael J. Clark. Family ties. He was a Reaganite who was huge, and everybody loved him. And that's how we got turned into me. I think it was Michael J. Clark, not Jonathan. But you can do that research. We'll go look at family ties. Where we're at is this. I was at the PowerShift, the conference all weekend. 10,000 screaming college students in the Washington Convention Center. It was like an unbelievable thing to behold after being on the road and meeting mostly, people coming to the screenings like median age is considerably older than me, and then all of a sudden I get into this room and I'm like, ah! I mean, it's reading Lisa Jackson like Michael Jackson. He walked on the stage and there's this huge eruption of people screaming and tearing their clothes off. And then of course she got protested because of her position on fracking or lack of position on fracking, which then the whole crowd cheered and did that. It was awesome. And here I am with all this incredible power in the room, which I really believe in. I was at the rally in Albany on Monday. There's another rally in Albany, and I'll say it 6 times, on May 2nd, for a band. I will be there, and Pete Seeger will be there. The first time in my life that hopefully will happen. So that's reason enough to go. I don't know. Where we're at is this. I go and do lobbying in Washington, D.C. with Environmental Working Group, Earth Justice, Food and Water Watch. And there is this, I think, to address the issue of the fracturing of the method. Yeah, so some people say, tighter regulations, we have to say, this is the way to rein in the industry. Frac Act, let's develop ironclad ordinances so that they, re-regulate them under the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Air Act, Clean Water. And then there are those people who are ban it, stop it, or a national moratorium, or that kind of thing. And I think the disconnect comes from, it's an assumption that we have to use less fossil fuels, not more fossil fuels. Develop less fossil fuels, not more fossil fuels. Developing natural gas, develop more fossil fuels, the wrong direction to go in. It's so easy to see that. Why are we going in that direction? $100 million of lobbying a year in Washington. Citizens United Supreme Court decision that says corporations can donate however much money anonymously and from outside of the country into our political process and influence the debate. Dennis Kucinich, when I interviewed him 3 weeks ago in D.C., said our democracy is on the scaffold. The only way we get it back is by doing, I think, what has made every advance in social and political thinking in the history of mankind. From democracy itself to women getting to vote to equality between the races, or at least an attempt in legislative terms, which is civil disobedience, which is and massive protest. I mean, that's what the power really is. But what's happening is NRDC, Environmental Working Group, Earth Justice, although I love those people dearly and they're really great, spend much more time in the halls of Washington dealing with the politics of compromise, trying to scrape and claw at whatever they can get. And God bless them for doing that. But the problem is that they never call on the membership to go take to the streets. In the United States, that kind of action is like the method of last resort. We're not like France. In France, they protest and the coffee gets cold. But 20,000 people march, my espresso was cold. And that's just their impulse. Our impulse is different. We do activism, we petition, we make documentaries, things like that. And where it really comes from is, we put Obama in the White House, we use the grassroots movement. I know, I was knocking on doors all throughout Pennsylvania and Wayne County. That's where the power comes from. Power comes from the bottom up. And it's a big bet, who knows what's going to happen this time around. Because the first election, under these new politics, where corporations could give any amount of money that they wanted, was this so-called wave election of 2010, where the Republicans took over the House. And the reason why the Frac Act won't pass is because the Republicans took over the House. There's no chance. I went from power shift, which is incredible energy, incredible, moving, unbelievable event, And then at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, met with the environmental legislative director of Senator Merkley from Oregon, who's on our side, who brought up Gasland in the Senate hearing. He wasn't so well versed on how that worked, but he did it. And then I entered into a dialogue with him about how the Colorado State regulator was lying. And sent them this whole 20-page letter about how he was lying and questions for the official record. And they won it. And they showed Gasland in the senator's office for his whole staff on Friday afternoon as their Friday night movie. And I was invited. This is access. But at 9 in the morning, the legislative environmental director goes, well, there's no chance of Friday night. And when you have in Pennsylvania, you have Pat Toomey, pro-drilling senator elected, Governor Corbett took $1 million from the gas industry. my county, Wayne County, Tom Marino, who wouldn't even let us sit down me and Mark Ruffalo. We went to this lobbying meeting in D.C. with all these Washington lobbyists. We walk in the door, and we're waiting to kind of go. We have an appointment to talk to the congressman. And he doesn't show up, but we're talking to his legislative director. And there's an empty room with a leather couch. Sit there. And he goes, let's talk right here. We're standing in the lobby talking to the guy. We weren't even allowed to sit down. It was one of the most rude things I've ever experienced. Yeah. I have a hard time sitting down when talking about the thing. But the point is that we're cornered. A rabbit will attack you if it's cornered. A lizard will attack you if it's cornered. There's no other option. You have to go out there and do. It's not rocket science. It's what's changed every single major change that's been important in history. But I was at Widener Law University in Harrisburg last night and laying out the parameters, which is basically like, okay, I'm in a room full of lawyers. I need lawyers for two reasons. Either you're going to go to jail or you're going to get me out of jail. And they looked at me like, and there was an oil and gas lawyer in the back, and he goes, well, there's got to be some middle ground. And I said, well, okay, black people can drink at the water fountain 25% of the time. How about that? Because we're in this room, and we're paying fossil fuel industry right now at that. Where's the light come from in this room?
Natural gas.
Natural gas. Okay. Want an economic project that's going to revitalize America? There are these amazing. It's the daytime right now. We have the light on. Every time you move, you got to pay. Every time you lecture, you got to pay. Every time you cook, you got to pay. Every time you put your clothes on your kids, you got to pay. Every time you turn on your computer, you got to pay. Two problems. We're endorsing them right now. If that's not slavery to a bunch of companies that have broken social contracts, then I don't know what is. So we have to take that part of it back, our own power, right? In that sense, we can take those wonderful, there are these amazing tubes that can go through a whole building and reflect the light from the sun and put it into the room during the daytime. And then there are these other things called batteries which can store it so you can use it at night. And every building should be doing that because it's otherwise we're just paying them for our lecture. It makes no sense. We should have it outside in the rain. Right? I wonder how much it costs. I wonder how much we're each individually giving them a quarter. So that's one solution. That's the only solution. That's what Van Jones was saying in Power Shift. The other solution is we also have to take back the power in the other way. It's participatory, it's democracy. You're demanded upon right now to march. Period. Because they're not listening. And it's true, the environmentalists aren't even listening. Sierra Club. Who here are Sierra Club members? I'm honest. Okay. What you got to do, Sierra Club's about to wage an attack on these guys. I'll make you a $64,000 bet. There's going to be a report coming out of Carnegie Mellon that says gas is better than coal. These guys are saying it's the same as coal or worse. I know it's the same as coal or worse. I mean, in all sorts of ways. And Sierra Club's going to endorse it. And it's going to be a war. It's going to suck.
Not the Atlantic chapter.
Well, then tell Mike Roon. Because he's the executive director, and I sat in a cafe with him in New York about 9 months ago, and he was like, well, Bob Howard's numbers are wrong. I'm telling you really. And that can't happen. Because it's just inertia, Tell the Sierra Club, we want you to call on us to the March on Washington. Tell the Sierra Club, we want you to call on us in the Atlantic chapter is telling you to go march in all of us. It's your club. You can cry if you want to. Just, you know what I'm saying? Because otherwise it's just going to keep going. And Power Shift, coal activists, gas activists, oil activists, extreme energy development. It's like one fracking, deepwater drilling, mountaintop removal, longwall mining, tar sand. They're desperate. That's their desperation. Primacy of oil is ending. They know it. They're subjecting us to ever more dangerous techniques of drilling. We're going to lay over, we're going to go out. It's just it. I mean, I'm going to go to Blair Mountain, which is one of these black mountains that refused to get blown up in West Virginia for mountaintop removal, June 5th through the 11th. I'll probably go the 8th through the 11th, so then speak in Harrisburg on the 7th. I'm a gas activist. I'm going to go and get arrested, hopefully not. I want to just document it, actually. With the coal, but I have to do it, with the coal people. And they'll be happy. And the coal people should come out and get arrested in Albany or Washington or the head of the top building at Cornell or whatever until they change the light system on this place. So I think that's what it's coming down to. Like I said, I don't know where you come in this dialogue. I don't know how far along the line. I don't say this in the movie Gasland. It's a year and a half ago we finished that movie. And I've been working on a sequel about the political system. And they're not listening. And Washington is awash in dirty money for dirty energy. The natural gas industry right now, T-Boone Pickens, you've heard about the Pickens thing. Pickens is right now having a press conference with Ted Turner. I'm sure Ted Turner is also responsible for Michael J. Fox somewhere. 6 degrees of... Anyway.
So Kevin Bacon's fault.
It's Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon actually... I don't know. We'll get him next time. But what I'm saying is that they're doing this conference right now at the National Press Club. I'm so happy that we had this conference call this morning, the three of us, with a bunch of press sources. New York Times was one of them, to go out there and say Pickens' plan is more fracking. It doesn't reduce emissions. These guys were wonderful, measured, scientific. I call Pickens an evil genius. Because he's distanced himself from fracking. He's injected himself into the debate, and he's just an oil tycoon becoming a gas tycoon. So what we need to do, in my opinion, is actually take back the power that we have in the building and the power that we have in the streets. Those are my recommendations. And I'm saying this as if it's some kind of revelation. You know what I mean? Like, we've been trying to figure it out. It's like a lot of thought. You know what I mean? So just open the history book. And I will, I just want to finish with this quote from Rachel Carson. Gasland kept getting compared to Santa Spring in his earlier reviews, so I better read this book. And I said right in the beginning, didn't have to get far into it, there's this amazing quote from 1962, which is, I think, the year or right before she died. And it's really simple. It's so amazing. Have we fallen into a mesmerized state that makes us accept as inevitable that which is inferior or detrimental, as though having lost the will or the vision to demand that which is good? And she goes on to say, if the forefathers could have imagined a Bill of Rights amendment for toxic poisoning, they would have done it. And I think we should campaign for an amendment to the Constitution about environmental public health rights. But this is the question: are we mesmerized? And I think you have to remember that the Freedom Riders, when they got on the bus, the previous bus had been blown up, right? They signed their last will and testament. It was a week before finals. And they got expelled. So, these are the stakes. There's no, we can lecture a lot about it, and we should do all that part of it. But we have to do everything the civil rights movement did.
Josh, I want to try to get to some questions here, but I do want to just mention one thing before we do. We have lost our ability to think big. We've lost our ability to think big. And
when you say we, you mean the government, though, right?
I mean all of us, we, because we are the society. And we've lost our ability. You know, we created a transcontinental railroad in this country but we were thinking big. This is the point. We were thinking big, all right? We've lost our ability to think big. And the fallacy of this political argument, because I am here to talk about politics, the fallacy of this political argument, which I've had this argument with my environmental friends, well, this is a transitional fuel, this is a bridge fuel. The fallacy is what it does, in operational terms, is it gives politicians a 30-year break from doing what they should be doing, which is getting to where we all think we need to go, which is renewable energy, alternative fuels, right? Well, I'll tell you how the politician looks at this. The politician says, I don't have to do anything for 30 years. And in the meantime, you lose the competitive edge of 30 years of research and development and operationalizing systems that are happening all over the world. So we've got to regain a sense of being able to think big. And I know it's tough when you're in debt, and it's tough when times are bad economically, but when was the last time you even heard someone talk about the economic benefits of alternative fuels? Not since Van Jones was drummed out of the White House have we heard anybody talking about the economic benefits. I gave a speech at Cheney University in Pennsylvania, which is the oldest historical black college in the United States, about 2 years ago. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to reach this audience? How am I going to make an impact upon this audience when many of these kids worry about getting out of their neighborhoods alive and whether they're going to have food on the table and whether they have a roof over their heads? How am I going to talk green to a black audience? And I talked about economic opportunity and economic freedom. And I talked about being on the cutting edge of technology that would be economically profitable, not only to the society, but to them as individuals. And I talked to them about not being, there are no more cabooses on trains anymore, but you get the idea. I talked to them about not being at the end of the train, but being the engineer in the front of the train. And we don't even talk about that anymore. When was the last time you even heard someone talking about the jobs that come along with wind turbines and solar energy? Gotta think big. Now, I know there's some questions out there, so let's open it again.
You know, I wanted to interject something while Josh was talking. I didn't appreciate that he didn't let me do that. I was recently at a conference here at Cornell on South Asian and issues of water in South Asia, and one of the conference presenters talked about T-born chickens buying up aquifers in the Southwest. And I wanted to interject that because I find that, you know, not only curious, but extremely dangerous. Somebody buying up public water supply. And hold on, and the privatization of water is another issue that could be interjected in this talk. And I have a few other things.
We want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity.
We do want to have questions.
Is there a question?
Can I just say about this?
I'm wondering if you're concerned about that, because a lot of water is used for hydrofracking.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say before.
Well, I think it's interesting because I don't view this as conspiratorial. I think that's a mistake. I think it's another resource, and these are resource guys made by resources. You might want to connect the dots and be like, oh, Pickens is using the water so he can sell us the water later, like some kind of thing on the Jetsons.
I don't know why he's buying.
But I would suggest, you're interrupting me now. I would suggest that it's a bad tactic to try to talk about conspiracy because it makes you sound a little wacko.
Are there any other questions?
I do think, though, however, that it is part of the system. They buy resources, they buy public resources, and that is one of the ways that they exploit those resources. All the more reason, the power of the building ourselves and so forth, to have your own access to not being dependent on people like people and big students.
Yeah. Well, asking the right question. Do you think, even with your massive investment in renewable energy, that it could provide equivalent amounts to fossil fuels?
Once again, I'm not a scientist, but I do trust that there is scientific justification and rationale that suggests the answer to that is yes. And I know that we owe it to ourselves to think in those terms. And if in fact, one, it is the right thing to do, so we ought to do it, but two, if it has economic benefits as well, then it's a no-brainer.
I'm giving you a visual aid from Stanford, their prestigious competitor. Path to sustainable energy by 2030 report, very interesting. Check it out. Just came out of Stanford. Scientific American.
What is it, September, I think?
Yeah, you just Google it, Stanford Renewable Energy Plan, that's one. There's a plan to repower America. There's a plan in the book, Plan B by Lester Brown. The Stanford one is 20 years, the Repower America one is 10 years, the Lester Brown one is like 7-year mobilization like FDR did to beat the Germans, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of plans. I mean, this is another weird, bogus thing that happens. The Pickens is like, well, we've got a plan. I'm the Pickens plan, he named after himself, and it's always posed in Washington as if, either we're going to do this or we're going to die! It's like, you got to do it now, we're going to die. And it's this, you have a plan? It's like, yeah, come on, there's like 25,000 people working on this thing. I mean, at least, there's plans out there, a lot of good ones.
Just to follow up on Sean's question, transitions take time. Regardless of what we might argue as to what the end state might be, I think all of us down deep inside we want to have a indigenous renewable energy supply for the long term. Makes sense. But the time to get there requires diligent attention. And I wonder how you would propose that the time scale, even if we got aggressive about it, which I think we should, but how long do you think it might take? And in the interim, what do we do for our primary energy?
Well, first of all, we could start to cut back some. Energy efficiency and energy conservation are other concepts and issues which seem to get lost in the mix. But we could start there. I also believe, though, that if you put a very aggressive investment strategy in place quicker, you'll get there quicker. And so the transition time will be reduced rather than elongated. Delay is a great tactic in the political arena. In fact, delay is not income security, it's job security. Never do today what you can put off until tomorrow is an axiom of political thought. And we've got to break out of that. I don't know if we can get there in 10 years or 5 years, or look, if we dumped $1 trillion on it, maybe we get there in 2 years. I don't know. But I know one thing, we have to develop a strategy to get there quickly. In fact, we should have been there by now. If we would have followed some of the prescriptions that were laid out during, God forbid, the Carter administration,
Before that.
or before even.
Project Independent. Right.
So the point is, we've dallied long enough, and we need an aggressive investment strategy now. Yes?
So I'm interested more in the health concerns of this, I guess. I'm not more concerned. I guess my concern is that what I haven't been able to find is any information about what could possibly be going on from a health perspective. And since you have traveled around the country and there is some stuff in your documentary, I just was hoping that you could offer a little insight because, as a researcher, I would like to be able to look for that in the data. We have public health data. There's lots of ways that we could creatively think about that, but not knowing what to look for, right? Like if there's an increase in cancer or an increase in neuropathy or
Well, part of the frustration is that there isn't a huge health study so far, and these are all cases of things that are just being cropping up. Theo Colborn, I don't know if you're familiar with Theo Colborn's research, the Garfield County Health Impact System, you looked at that. The asthma rates in the Barnett Shale is 3 times, so you got all that stuff.
Dan
Bowles
at Pittsburgh. Dan Bowles at the University of Pittsburgh is doing a lot of work on health impact.
Well, he just left the university.
And well, he's transitioning out, but look at some of his work. It's BOLD.
I mean, but part of the problem is that those studies, EPA study is not a health study. It's just an ecological study. And Theo and I have been calling for a larger epidemiological study because she believes in these areas there's enough data to do the study, and that's one of the things we're calling for. Look, this is an open experiment on the American people, and the research, we're coming up with lots and lots of problems all over the place, but no research. And it would be great. One of the things that we asked for was that an independent university or a university without a horse in the race, would actually fund this kind of study. So maybe it's here.
Yeah.
Student. Pick a student.
Yes. Anyone?
Go there.
What do you think the economic incentives are for alternative fuels? I mean, I have worked in both industries, very briefly, the oil industry and the alternative fuels industry. And thus far, I mean, you can't really convince the public to go out and buy a $45,000 electric vehicle that goes 30 miles when it starts. Then you got to plug it in for 12 hours in a special socket. Oil, I mean, you just go, you drill it, you throw it into your car, right? But these alternative fuels are very dependent on the weather patterns, right? So for like the cellulosic ethanol, or if you want to use it as a feedstock, like switchgrass, you have to worry about the weather and whether or not the feedstock's going to grow. You have to worry about contamination issues, getting bacteria in, that introduces supply disruptions. I mean, those are difficult things that you have to deal with. And in your mind, what are the incentives to go on with it?
Well, before the Tennessee Valley Authority was created, there was a large swath of rural America that did not have electricity. And the federal government created a program to electrify the countryside. All right? So I don't know how much it's going to take, but I know, and I don't know in what form it's going to take, but I know that if you invest big in making big things happen, they can happen. And we need to invest in a smart grid. We need to figure out a way to capture the sun and its energy and distribute it to places where the sun doesn't shine. Now, is this hard? Yes. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. But we got to think big, and we got to think in long term. We can't continue as a society to exist with this short-term mentality. It's like we measure the profit and loss statements on a quarterly basis, and we measure everything we do in politics by how it affects me between now and the next election. And somehow, we have to get into a position to start thinking about the next generation, not the next election. So, can it be done? Yes. Should it be done? Yes. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. But not only should it be done, it has to be done. This is not a luxury. This is a necessity. Fossil fuels are finite. All right? This may sound simplistic. I'm sure all of you brilliant college kids know this, but reiterate it with some of your friends. Fossil fuels are finite. It's alliteration. It's cute. All right? No, not wind in the sun is not finite.
The sun does not continuously shine.
What?
Well, but there's this wonderful, I don't know what you...
that, right?
You can capture the energy and distribute it.
I don't know what you would make of this, but there's this neat chart over here.
Okay.
There's one cancel you. It shows there's like the peak of there's geothermal baseline, there's the solar peak, there's a wind peak, and that you're kind of distributing it in a way that's evening things out.
Right.
That's a chart. So I'm going to hold it up like James Inhofe or somebody. But you know, and I would say though that it's a really fascinating question. I don't know. I think that hydrogen cars exist now. I think what Lance is saying is that we need actually more government, less government, and I agree. Government built. I mean, most of the things that you enjoy: roads, bridges, hospitals, post office, library, Netflix. Okay, well, not Netflix.
No.
But the point is that the free market created Netflix. We're not in free market right now. If we're in free market, we might stand a chance to develop all these other technologies. What we're in is the opposite. The Natural Gas Act that's being proposed in Congress now is actually subsidies and gimmies to an industry that's already making billions of dollars. And that means we're in the opposite of free market. I actually, maybe we'll go Michael J. Fox and say free market, Reaganomics. Let's say, okay, let's put everybody on a level playing field. But we're not doing that. We're actually subsidizing that.
It starts in here in about 2 minutes.
I just want to go back. I just want to go back to the moral equivalent of war. I want to go back to the moral equivalent of war language. When we're involved in a war, we don't ask how much it costs to win. We pay whatever it takes to win. All right? This is war. This is war because it's about the survival of the planet. This is not a cost-benefit analysis here.
Time's up. That's it.
Thank you very much.